begin with, I want to give a little bit of explanation of why we selected these bikes in particular. Number one feature you can notice right away is the retro styling. The girder front springs, the beach cruiser handlebars, nice comfort seat, fenders. Fenders are a must when commuting. The bullet headlight. But primarily, or can't say secondary, because primarily the most important thing about an electric bike is the battery box. So I wanted to spend a minute to explain why we made the motor selection that we did. What I saw on a lot of electric bike forums were people asking for more power. So that's why we went with the 1,000-watt motor, which, in my opinion, if you want a more powerful bicycle than 1,000 watts, you need to go to a motorcycle, because 1,000 watt will put you way up over the legal limit. Here in Texas, 1,000 watt is legal, and some states, also California, it's legal. You get up to, well, if you want to go to England, it's my understanding that they're only allowed 250 watts. So there's a lot of leeway between states, so you need to know what your local states allow. Also, the battery is 48 volt, 20 amp hour. That gives you 960 available watts. What I've noticed is the only time that it draws that is when you're leaving a dead stop or going up a hill. It might draw something close to 900, usually about 800, but for the most part it never uses a fraction of that. The point being, 48 volts, 20 amp hours. That means it can draw 20 amps for 1 hour. So theoretically, if you're running 1,000 watts constantly, this battery will last you approximately 1 hour. In reality, you don't use 1,000 watts constantly, and for the most part it's half of that. And personal experience has shown that an hour and a half is about the life of these. Actually, I don't want to brag and go over that, but it depends on how you do it. You can spend a good day out on these bikes if, when you're leaving the dead stop, you pedal a little bit to assist it. We don't call this a pedal assist motor personally. We call it a pedal assisting the motor. I don't know how to give it a better description, because a lot of bikes, they'll expect you to pedal and the motor's going to help you. Well, it's just the opposite with us. We pedal a little bit to help the motor to get the maximum range from our batteries. So that is about all I wanted to say about the motor there. Way to go.
go.
Yeah.
You go.
Disc brakes. Felt like we had to have disc brakes on these bikes. Number one, 1,000-watt motor, very powerful. Well, even with a smaller motors, you're running 20 miles an hour. When you're hitting 20 miles an hour, you've got to be able to stop. With the regular caliper brakes up on the rims, you wipe those out so fast, and it just really, they really don't give you the stopping performance you need. The disc brakes do. These brakes will stop you very fast. Very good. I'm really happy with them. Something I pointed out on the selection of these bikes is the girder front end. It's a Springer style. When you're hitting 20 miles an hour, you can feel every bit of the vibration come through on your handlebars. You need some kind of suspension. I went with the retro look. I really like the way these look. But no matter what kind of suspension you have on the front end of your bicycle, you need something, because that makes all the difference in the world. couple of features I wanted to point out here on the handlebars. Number one, the display. Okay, down here you'll notice it has a place that shows you the wattage you're using. The PAS is your pedal assist level, which we run it up to full power. I don't know about you, we go full blast all the time. Odometer, trip meter, you just have to press the little button to change the selection there. Battery usage, and of course your miles per hour. Head to Okay, I wanted to talk about the throttle. We chose a thumb throttle. Inevitably, if you have a twist grip, when you get off the bike for some reason, or moving the bike, if you have it turned on, you will turn it accidentally, and the bike will launch like a rocket when there's nobody sitting on it. So, the thumb grip avoids that little scenario there. One key feature of electric bikes that I can't think of anybody discussing is the fact that the brake levers have a switch on them that cuts the motor out when you hit the brake. So you don't have to worry about the motor going and pushing on the brakes at the same time. I've seen people get on the bike and not understand why it's not going. They're pressing the throttle. They don't realize that they're holding the brake just a little bit, and that's enough to cut that switch and the bike won't move. So, very key feature in electric bikes is the cutout switch on the brake handles. Right now we have two color bikes, black and green. The green one we haven't built a solid box for yet. This is my first design on the electric bikes, these bikes. In determining what kind of battery box we were going to have, this is where I started, and you can see it's kind of archaic, but my wife likes this bike very much, and this is her bike's Okay, what I want to talk about here is the seat post. And this is the stock seat post. And one of the situations is that this is a larger bike. This is a custom built bike. It's a little bit larger than a standard bicycle, which makes it a little bit taller. And even this seat here I have lowered. I changed the attachment bracket here so that it's inside instead of on the outside. Otherwise this seat would be another inch higher, lowered down as low as it goes. If you're under 6 foot tall, you'll need a lower seat. And we had a progression here. You can see I've lowered this seat flat down on the frame. That's my favorite, my personal favorite. But we had a custom seat mount made that lowers the seat and moves it back. So moving back the center of gravity on these bikes is makes a huge difference in the way they perform. And this mount is still adjustable if you need it higher, or, well, this is as low as it goes. But that is a very comfortable height right there. Something I wanted to point out about electric bikes is they're very heavy. The motor is a good sized chunk of iron. One of the reasons why we went with the back motor instead of the front motor, you don't want all that weight on your front end. The battery boxes, the way we build them, the battery is a very low center of gravity here. But when you move these bikes, for any reason you have to pick them up. You need to pick them up by the frame. I've torn up seats by picking them up by the seat. You don't want to do that. You need to get hold of the frame and lift it to move it. Or, if you have a back rack, you can lift it by the back rack. But you don't want to pick it up by the seat. That's a big no-no. I have quite a few discussions with people about battery location, because one of the things people like to do with the bicycles is try to make them look like motorcycles with the big gas tank up on the top. Unfortunately, that puts your center of gravity pretty high. Even though moving in a straight line you're okay. If you, well, for some bizarre reason, like somebody pulls out in front of you and you have to stop real quick, and if you have the front wheel turn, I had a lady pull out on her bicycle. She didn't realize how fast I was going, of course, and I hit her front wheel of her bicycle just enough to turn. Even though I was stopped, it still threw me off the bike because of the weight I had up the top. So we mount our batteries as low as possible. It's down here inside of this box, and it gives you a low center of gravity. I was discussing that about the seat height. You know, you don't need the height on an electric bike when you're pedaling. You don't need to pedal. The only times you pedal is you're assisting the motor a little bit. Not the motor's assisting you pedaling, but you're assisting the motor a little bit on, you know, a power takeoff. You can pedal a little bit and you'll be up to 20 miles an hour just like that. But the lower center of gravity gives you a much more stable ride. If you have a regular bicycle, you don't have to deal with that because it's rare when you're going 20 miles an hour. So this is very important, low center of gravity on these bikes. Mud guards or fenders, depending on your point of view. They're want to talk a little bit about our history with the bikes. You'll hear me refer to this being the first bike from time to time. It's the first bike I built on this style of frame. We ordered these frames custom from a factory. I have green frames and I have black frames. One of the features about these frames is they have a 135 millimeter dropout, which is wider than a standard frame, because you'll find most electric motors are 135 millimeter width, whereas a stock frame is only 127 millimeters, I believe. But back to what I was saying about our history of the bikes. We started building bikes more than 6 years ago, and our first bike had a hub motor on the back and the battery mounted on the back, and we found that it made it extremely ass heavy. That anytime you went to lift the bike, it was like the whole front end would come up and you'd be dragging around the rear end, and it made the rear end the back tire more susceptible to blowouts. So we moved on to moving the batteries up into the center. My first bike, that was the first bike I built for my business partner, Carl. My first bike was a full mountain bike, and I had to mount the battery. It was full suspension, so I had to mount the battery on the top bar, which it made it very top heavy. So again, it's been a progression. It hasn't been one specific thing that we decided to buy these bikes and this is it. We've built up for reasons to this. Like I was saying, this is the first battery box I built on this style of frame. I have an idea in mind of a style, but then we moved on to the full cover battery box, which looks extremely stylish, really nice. So I wanted to point that out, that on our website you can see the different bikes we built over the years and why we came around to this style of bike and why we ordered these bicycles special. Disc brakes, Springer front end, just big battery area, just all these little things that add up that makes a huge difference in how a bike is going to perform as an electric bike. Fenders. turning the bike, picking it up by the rack, turn it, to lift it rather. That's how it's done. This is slow motion. Okay, I want to talk about the thumb throttle. We went with the thumb throttle as opposed to the twist throttle because we have in the past had situations where when you have the power on and you turn the bike a little bit, it's just a natural motion to turn your hand like that and the bicycle will launch like a rocket. If you're not sitting on it, there's nothing to hold back all the torque, and it doesn't matter what size of motor you have on them. I can't imagine what it's like with a 1,000-watt motor on it now, but they will climb right up the wall or jump out into the street, which we've had problems with people doing that, getting off the bike, going to turn in the middle of the street, and it lands, 20 feet down the road. Not to mention inside the house, climbing the curtains and things like that. So that is the reason, let me turn that back off. That's the reason we went with a thumb throttle. On top of that, it's more of a natural action to grip like this. So when you're riding, it's not a strain on your hand. When you're with a twist throttle, you'll find that after you ride like this for a while, your wrist gets really sore. I've had both. We also had a different throttle that came sideways, which was very painful to use. But we found that this style of throttle is by far the best. I mean, at least we prefer it. top discussions that you hear mostly on the electric bike forums or talking to anybody is range, distance, how far will it go. Well, we selected a 1,000-watt motor because of the power it delivers. It gives you, I believe, just the right amount of power, the right speed to commute, to make a good long commute without any trouble. You need a battery matched to the motor to have a really nice performing bicycle. So that's why we went with a 48 volt 20 amp hour battery. So in theory, you've got 48 volts, 20 amp hours gives you 960 watts matched with a 1,000-watt motor. So again, in theory, that'll give you 1 hour drive time. That's if you're driving full blast. Even then, if you're driving full blast, you'll find you don't use 1,000 watts continuously, especially going on a nice smooth road. It only uses about 400 watts. The point is, in reality, you end up hitting, if you drive the bike hard, you can get probably an hour and a half easy out of this. If you pedal when you leave a dead stop, that helps the battery a great deal. When you pedal from a stop, you can be up to 20 miles an hour like that. Going up a hill, you may pedal to help the battery, and you'll find that that increases your range of your battery. If you help pedal whenever it's trying to get up to speed, of course once you're up to speed, even in the highest gear, it doesn't do any good to pedal. It just freewheels, literally. So, but getting up to those speeds, that's the heaviest battery usage, is getting up to those speeds. So you don't have to pedal. I rarely ever pedal, just sometimes I do. So that's just a factor, something I like to talk about when explaining these bikes is, like I said, that's the first thing everybody asks is what kind of range do you have? Also, if you do run out of battery, and say you're running around and you forget about it or something, and you run the battery down and the bike won't run, then this has a 6-speed gear box on it. And I say gearbox, this has 6-speed gears. And you can shift the gears down to whatever you need. You can shift it down to the lowest, and it's easy to pedal. One thing about electric motors is when you pedal, you can feel the drag on it. So you need to have that ability to change speeds. If you need to pedal, then you need a low speed. But when this motor's running and you want to pedal to help, then you need a very high speed. So it's very important to have a gear system on these bikes. Way to go. Go, yeah. Keep going. And yet again, we're going to talk about the batteries, because people, that's the number one fear people have, of running out of battery. Well, you can get an easy hour and a half drive time out of these batteries, driving full bore, stop, 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 go, and up hills, down hills, not having to pedal a lick, and you'll get an hour and a half. I hate to qualify anything like that because I don't like to read on these websites that say, oh, you can get 2-hour drive times off our batteries. I want to see that in action. My experience is telling you what we get out of these batteries, and I know we get an hour and a half, and we have not even gone to the full extent of these batteries. We have been clean across this town and back and never had to pedal a lick except when we wanted to. So once you've depleted the battery, or you've had a good day out and you want to recharge it, then it takes 3 hours to charge. What happens is you should only charge lithium batteries at 1/3 of their rated amperage. So these are 20 amp hour batteries, so you'd never charge them at more than 7 amps. So it takes 3 times as long to charge them back up. This is just standard with lithium batteries. It's the way it should be until they come out with a new formula for the batteries. One other thing I want to point out about lithium batteries is they have a battery management system. You'll never see it. It's a small computer chip circuit that rides on top of the batteries. It's wrapped up inside with the batteries. It manages the charge rate of the batteries. It manages the discharge rate of the batteries. Once the battery is fully charged, it won't let the batteries charge anymore. Once the battery gets down to a certain level, it won't let the batteries discharge. You can't run the motor if the battery reaches a certain level. This is important because people and their, first thing they say is, oh, lithium batteries, they catch on fire. Well, garbage batteries do. Very rarely do they ever do it. You will extremely rare when you hear stories about these batteries catching on fire, and it's because they have a battery management system, and it's designed to keep that kind of stuff from happening, and it's extremely rare. So that's that. Tires. The rage now seems to be the fat bike tires with the electric bikes. And this is something dating back into the 70s when people were building electric vehicles. You want a low resistance tire that helps extend your range on your vehicle. And so the fat tires reduce your rolling resistance or increase your rolling resistance. This is a 2¼ inch tire. So, and it's a street tire, and the top of it is tall. I like to keep 40 pounds of pressure in them to keep them hard to reduce the rolling resistance. So I have a lot of trouble with the idea of fat tire bikes, because they just don't make a good street bike, in my opinion. Other people can argue all they want. It's the same situation. You buy the fat tire bikes, odds are you're not going to be able to find fenders for them. So that's just another point I want to make about why we chose these bicycles and the setup we have with them. Key problems we've experienced with these bikes: extremely rare to have a motor problem or even a battery problem, unless the battery had some kind of problem. We just never had a battery problem that we didn't create ourselves. The number one problem, the controller, and they handle all the power, the full brunt. That's the workforce in here. You think the motor is, it's the controller. It's got to handle all that amp being dumped into the motor and coordinating with it. This has 3 Hall transistors in it that help, well, it determines the rotation and the speed, and everything is determined by those Halls, and they go through this controller. Any trouble you have with the controller, easily replaceable, but that's my job. And that's one of the things I guarantee about this bike is the electrics are pretty solid on these bikes. 6-speed transmission. I spoke a little bit about that, how important I feel it is to have a transmission on a bike, because when you're riding the bike and you want to assist the motor a little bit, getting off the starting line or going up a hill, you need it in a high gear. If you've had too good of a day out and you run the battery out for any reason, you need to pedal without the motor, then you need a really low gear to get around. These bikes are heavy, but when you put it in a low gear, they're easy to ride. So I wanted to point that out. We've got 6 gears to choose from here. It's really nice. Key feature about these bikes that I can't talk enough about: fenders. I really like the styling on these fenders. They have these nice little fender skirts, and it gives them even more of that retro look. But they're fully functional. You should be able to go through mud puddles with no problems without getting all your back wet. And I guarantee I see people on forums all the time asking for fenders, wanting fenders for bicycles, and especially those fat tire bikes. Those people are in trouble. I guess one day somebody's going to come out with a fat tire fender bike, but right now I think this is by far the best design. I said I'm not a fat tire fan, and I like these fenders. So far, if you'll notice, this is the only bike that we've got any graphics on. Actually, this is the only green bike I've built so far. But you'll notice the black bikes don't have graphics on them. But we're going to be putting some on. And honestly, my business partner prefers the straight black. I like it. I actually ordered these bikes with no decals on them. That's why you don't see any logos or anything on the bikes. Something we're going to have to add, and if you like this battery style of box, then there'll be more of those to come in the future also. But we can do graphics.
Plugging things in.
I wanted to spend a minute explaining about the battery charger. It's got 3 prongs on it, and we have a port on the battery, and you just have to put it in and rotate it a little bit, and it plugs right in. I always plug the battery in first and then plug it into the wall. You see the two lights. You got a red light, two red lights. One of the lights will turn green when the battery is fully charged. So you just have to wait and watch for that. And we're going to time it. This bike isn't fully discharged, but I imagine it'll still take a good hour, hour and a half for it to charge up.
There it goes.
As you can see, this bike's been charging for a while, so it's already gone green. Something I want to point out, that when the batteries are charging, the charger will get very warm, almost hot to the touch. But don't worry about that. Whenever it's finished charging, it cools right off. I mean, that's just part of electricity, right? So don't worry about that. And this one's green, so it's full charged. I'll just unplug it, unplug the cord, close it back up, little dust cover, and this bike's ready to go.